Hello, Comics Alternative fans. Before we start with the episode, we want to invite all of you to check out our Patreon campaign.
That's right. Go to www.patreon.com/comicsalternative for more details. There you'll find more information about the campaign and the cool rewards levels we have.
For as little as $1 a month, you can help us maintain good quality comics talk, and the more you contribute, the more perks you get.
These include monthly podcast episodes exclusive to Patreon supporters, as well as the chance to help us choose which books we review on the show. So be sure to visit www.patreon.com/comicsalternative and become one of our proud podcast patrons.
Yeah, and now on with the show.
This is the Comics Alternative, episode 243. A look at the June Previews catalog. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, we're going to be looking through the June Previews catalog. But before we get to that, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the great folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are 20 to 35% off the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some unbelievable specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price, sometimes 50% off of the cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are more impressive than that.
That's right, and since this is our previews episode, you can expect that a lot of the stuff we talk about today will be deeply discounted at dcbservice.com. In fact, the June orders or the June previews are already up on DCB Service, so you can check those out as we talk about them.
That's right. You can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service, and June is no different. Go to their website, dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
Andy, before we get into the June Previews catalog, we've got a bit of listener mail to share with our listeners.
Great.
Mail time. Ooh, the mail's here. That means we get to see our old friend, Mailbox.
The first message is a tweet we got from a dedicated listener, especially lately. He's been quite vocal about his support for the Comics Alternative. He's also a new Patreon supporter, and this is Jay Loving. He's the one who told us, holy balls, you guys are doing great with the interviews. He tweeted us the other day to say that the Two Guys with PhDs is the most intelligent comic book-related podcast out there.
Wow, that's nice praise.
It is. And Jay, we appreciate the tweets, the praise, and please continue spreading the love.
Yeah, I'm running through my list of podcasts, comics podcasts that I know of in my head and thinking if there are anybody that are more intelligent.
There's not. Just quit thinking about it. Now, the next message we got is actually something we received the other day through SpeakPipe. So let's listen to this.
You guys are awesome. I listen from Australia and do comics and art, but also I have, I guess you could say, disability, so I spend a lot of time lying around and listening to you guys, which I've discovered a couple of months ago on Castbox. So yeah, I love the show, and listening to female artists as well have been really inspiring. So thank you very much. It's awesome, and I'll somehow support it. I've got to check out this website. Bye.
So, Holly, thank you very much for leaving us a SpeakPipe message. You know, people don't often use SpeakPipe to leave us messages, and so it's always nice when someone does, and especially a great message like the one Holly left. And it's also great that she's in Australia.
Yeah, all that's great. I really appreciate that message. It's encouraging when we get messages like that let us know that there are people out there that are not only listening, but really kind of get something important out of what we're doing.
Yeah. Now, there's actually a follow-up with Holly, because I emailed her to thank her for the SpeakPipe message and to ask if she was okay sharing it on the show. And she said yes, although she thought that her voice sounded a little funny. But then she made a comment about our voices because, she's never met us and she was wondering what we look like. She says in her email follow-up, "It's funny. When you listen to people online a lot, you create your own ideas about what they look like. I imagine you guys to look like Ben Affleck and Jason Lee in Chasing Amy. Ha ha ha." And so I followed up to ask, okay, who's who? And then she said, "You or I am Lee and Andy is Affleck."
Yeah, I can live with that.
Yeah. I think you got the better comparison there. But hey, I'll take Lee as well. Again, Holly, thank you very much for your kind message, and keep listening.
Yeah. Thanks again, and we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And a third message that we want to share is from someone who bears some really interesting news that could be useful to several of our listeners. This is from Joseph Coco, and he works at NettoSoup Studios. He writes, "I'm a comics fan, and my fiancée, Becca Hilburn, is a comics creator. I've been listening for a few months now and was hoping you would consider promoting a sequential arts scholarship we're sponsoring called National Art and Trade Tuition Opportunity. I'm not sure how far in advance you record or how selective you are with your Twitter, but the deadline for this, for the scholarship, is June 30th and is available for anyone hoping to or continue to attend college in an art program." And as you can hear, Joseph, we definitely were able to get this blurb in before June 30th. So if you want to find out more about this, you could go to the scholarship website, which is NATTOSOUP.com/scholarship. That's NATTOSOUP.com/scholarship. And we'll try to remember to put that link up at the show notes as well. There's also a promotional video we can link to, and you would need a link if you want to submit to the scholarship. You would need a link to your online portfolio and a 500-word essay. So I think this is great, Andy, because many of our listeners are artists, and they've told us quite a number of times that they listen to our podcast as they're creating. So if this is you, if you're listening to this right now as you're creating, then drop your pen or pencil and check out NettoSoup.com/scholarship, and it could be submitted for you.
Yeah, and also, a lot of our listeners are teachers who may have students who would be, would be qualified for this. I can think of a few just off the top of my head that I'm going to send that link to.
That's great. Well, let's get into the June previews catalog, and who knows if this is going to be a longer show or not. When I was going through this month's catalog, it seemed about average to me, but then again, who knows? We could fly through this, or it could take forever.
I got a lot of stuff. So.
Okay. Well, we're going to start where we always start in Dark Horse, and where in Dark Horse do you begin?
On page 38.
Okay. Before we get there, I want to mention on page 37, we have the next library edition of Hellboy, and it's been a while, and this one is Hellboy in Hell, the library edition. And so it's good to see that they're continuing the library editions.
Yep.
But then on the topic of Mike Mignola, we go to 38.
Yeah, we have an original graphic novel hardcover written by Mignola and drawn by Warwick Johnson Cadwell called Mr. Higgins Comes Home. And this looks like it's a kind of gothic vampire story with some really nice artwork that we get a sample of here from Warwick Johnson Cadwell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you have something else to say about that?
Well, it looks like this is continuing the thing we talked about in previous episodes of the kind of European album style graphic novels, because I think it's a little larger, isn't it? Or maybe not. No, it's a little smaller. But it's 56 pages for $15 in hardcover.
Yeah, and Mignola's been doing that with a variety of releases over the past couple of years. So
right.
And they actually compare this to the Amazing Screw-On Head.
For its general outlandishness.
So yeah, we start off the show with a Mike Mignola double shot. After that, I go to page 45. Do you have anything before that?
No.
Yeah, and this is something else that Dark Horse has been doing, is coming out with re-releases of various Neil Gaiman stories. This one is Harlequin Valentine, written by Neil Gaiman with art by John Bolton. And, I mean, are you familiar with this? Did you read it originally when it came out?
Yeah, a long time. That was a while ago, right?
It's been a while. I can't remember when it was. I didn't read it when it first came out. So, and as with the other Gaiman re-releases and repackagings, this one is also a hardcover. After that, where do you go?
To 50.
I do as well.
And that is two things on page 50, actually. The latest volume of Brian Talbot's Granville is out. So Granville Force Majeure. And that's a hardcover coming in at 176 pages for $24.99.
And then on that same page, right beside it, is Michael Chabon's The Escapists trade paperback. Did you read this series when it first came out several years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I got the individual issues. I can't remember if it came out as a trade, but if it did come out as a trade, I didn't get the trade.
Yeah. I don't remember that either. It says now available in affordable soft cover in a larger format, which may mean that it wasn't hardcover and smaller. I don't know. Because it was coming out at about the same time that was it still Dark Horse that was doing the Escapist comic?
Right.
Yeah, and so I can't remember. It may be that the original matched the size, because those Escapist comics were just slightly larger than digest size, but smaller than a regular comic.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
or at least the collections were. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that the Escapists. I mean, I think they came out as square bound.
No, they were
collections.
They were individual issues, and then there were two collections.
Yeah, but the individual issues were square bound.
I can't recall because I have my individual issues packed up somewhere in one of my storage boxes. But I'm looking at my bookshelf and I see the collections.
Yeah,
which are smaller size.
Yeah, I have the individual volumes or whatever. But yeah, so but this was whereas those were short stories, this is a full length story. Written by Brian K. Vaughan with some really nice art by Steve Rolston, Jason Sean Alexander, Philip Bond, and Eduardo Barreto.
Yeah. So it's good that this is coming back.
Mm-hmm. You wrote something about this, didn't you?
I presented on The Escapist.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember.
Mm-hmm. Now, I go next to page 53. Do you have anything before that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Were you going to highlight Rashomon, a Commissioner Heigo Kobayashi case?
Yes.
Okay. This looks interesting. I don't know anything about it outside of the fact that Victor Santos is doing it, the art and the writing.
Mm-hmm.
It says a Commissioner Heigo Kobayashi case. Have there been other Commissioner Heigo Kobayashi cases?
Well, this says, according to the bullet point on the solicit, that part 1 was originally only published in Spain, and this volume collects both parts in one complete hardcover. So does that mean part 2 was published in the U.S.?
I have no idea.
So this has some curious, possibly publication history, but yeah, I'm not really sure. Is Heigo Kobayashi a character that existed outside? It says Santos writes and illustrates a crime and mystery story inspired by Ryunosuke Akutagawa's tales featuring the heroic Commissioner Heigo Kobayashi.
So yeah, I guess that's my main question. Have there been other stories, or at least comics adaptations of Heigo Kobayashi, other cases of his in the past, or is this the first one of what may be a new comic series? I don't know.
So then also on that page is hardcover Gregory Suicide by Eric Grissom and Will Perkins IV, which is a Dark Horse original. Set in the future, the obsolete AI program Gregory wakes in a newly cloned body to a world now unfamiliar to him and is haunted by the memories of his past lives, each one ending in death by his own hand. So that sounds interesting. That's got a, I don't know, got a kind of William Gibson sound to it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm glad that you pointed that out, because when I was going through the catalog, I saw that, but I didn't really pay attention to it because I was trying to figure out what the, Commissioner Heigo Kobayashi case thing was all about.
Yep.
So that's where my attention was. But yeah, that the Gregory Suicide does look interesting.
Yep.
And then I have just one final thing in Dark Horse.
Okay, I'm done. So go ahead.
Because and this is on the next page. This is the next in the EC archives, and this is Aces High. So this, was part of EC's New Direction series, short-lived. And I think the last EC archives, or one of the last EC archives they did, was another Valiant in the New Direction series. So they're keeping up with this. They're being thorough, so that's good.
Yeah. I have other collections of the 5 issues of Aces High, and those New Directions books have some really nice art, but the stories just aren't what was going on in the pre-code EC stuff.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of that New Direction stuff is largely for completists.
Mm-hmm. So now we move on to DC Vertigo, and I don't have much with these guys. What about you?
I have 2 things.
Okay.
And they're in the DC proper section. Mm-hmm. I just want to quickly mention that I'm on page 91. We get the first solicit for Tim Seeley's new run on Hellblazer. So congratulations to Tim for getting that gig. I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I noticed that. That is cool. And I hope he's on it for a while, because with Hellblazer, Constantine, whatever they choose to call it, they seem to be going through creators or creative teams fairly quickly. And so it'd be great if Tim really resonated with this and he was on it for a while.
Yeah, the tradition with the original Hellblazer series was for a lot of those writers to do kind of 4-year or 40-issue stints, and that hasn't happened in a while.
No, so that's good.
Yep.
And then I know one of my few things in DC is on page 107.
Okay.
And that is Future Quest Showcase #1. And I mentioned that because we've talked about Future Quest on the show before. You read it. I really haven't read it yet, but it's good to see that they're continuing with this.
Yeah, and that Jeff Parker's getting to continue to write it. I like the idea of a showcase series because there's so many properties out there that they played with in Future Quest. So that, if we get here, we're getting a Space Ghost and Herculoids, and who knows what else we'll be seeing more of the other characters that they've established.
Yes. And we can expect more because they say in the solicit, that new adventures begin now that, after the thrilling events of Future Quest.
Right.
First up, Space Ghost and his young wards team up with Herculoids.
Yep.
And the only other thing that I have in DC, and I guess it's more of an observation than anything that I will probably get, and that is this new series of King Kirby Centennial titles that begins on page 120.
Yeah, so it goes from 120 to 125. There's a group of one-shots, each one featuring one or more Kirby creations, and as well as a reprint story of a classic Kirby comic. So these are going to be double sized, or 48 pages. So we can guess a chunk of that's going to be the reprint and then the original stuff. And we've got New Gods, Newsboy Legion and Boy Commandos, Sandman, Manhunter, and more New Gods stuff. But do any of these stand out to you as ones that you're particularly curious about?
Well, I said I wouldn't necessarily get these, but I'm kind of on the fence here. I may just get them, but the one that really stands out to me is the Newsboy Legion and the Boy Commandos special, because it's Howard Chaykin.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm going to get all of these.
Yeah.
That's the one that has the creative team that I'm the most interested in. But I think these others could be worthwhile. I mean, the Black Racer and Shiloh Norman special that is written by Reginald Hudlin and drawn by Dennis Cowan and Bill Sienkiewicz is also interesting. Team up in an interesting set of characters to devote a single issue to. And then following that, we get, I think something also I wanted to make an observation about, which is these new volumes of Kirby's Fourth World. There's on page 127, there's a Fourth World omnibus that collects the New Gods series, Forever People, the Hunger Dogs, some other new stuff, and then the run in Jimmy Olsen, which was about 15 issues. So, close to 50 comics in there, maybe. I don't know.
1,536 pages.
Right. And it doesn't even include Mr. Miracle, which is getting its own separate volume because Mr. Miracle ran 18 issues. So basically you can get that Jack Kirby Fourth World omnibus and get the Mr. Miracle book for, what is it, $180, and then you'll have all all the Fourth World stuff. Now I have the omnibuses that came out in 4 volumes.
The New Gods.
Yeah, that has all this material in it, including the Mr. Miracle stuff.
Right.
So those are much more manageable.
Right, because go ahead. Yeah, no, a number of years ago they came out with the 4 volumes in hardcover, and then a few years later they came out with the 4 volumes in paper. Mm-hmm. So if you didn't get those and you want everything in almost one big omnibus plus an additional volume, then you got this Fourth World omnibus and the Mr. Miracle.
Yeah. In fact, I had a little time tracking down the 4th volume of that hardcover set because I had gotten the first 3 when they came out and then never got around to ordering the 4th one, and then it went out of print, but I was able to find it at a show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else in DC or Vertigo?
Nope.
And this is the first time that I can remember that neither of us mentioned anything in Vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple things, but I don't know. Not a lot of new going on there, just the collections. So I go to IDW to page 166. Do you have anything before that?
Yes, I have a couple things on page 158. There is Michael Recycles Environmental Adventures. This is written by Ellie Wharton with art by Alexander Colombo and Thomas Zoller. And this just really looks fun, and it looks like something not just for kids, but it could be all ages. It says, enjoy environmentally conscious kid crusader Michael Recycle as he takes the eco-friendly leap into his first comic. Michael's green adventures are about to get a whole lot messier when he faces threats to Earth's environment from all over the globe. So I think that what we should do is order a copy of this and send it to our current president.
Well, maybe it'll be pitched at his level, but I don't know. I don't know how much it'll sink in. Yeah, I think that's interesting. It was just when you read that solicit, it just reminded me of when I was a kid and watching Super Friends on Saturday morning, like almost every villain the Super Friends fought in those early seasons in particular were like environmental threats. People who are polluting or trying to do something to the water, the seawater or whatever. And there was definitely an agenda in the original Super Friends series. They weren't just like fighting, Lex Luthor and the Joker or people like that. They were trying to protect the planet and teaching a valuable lesson that clearly didn't sink in on our generation.
No.
Okay. Well, that's sad.
Yeah. After that, I want to mention something on page 164, and this is Bloom County, Real, Classy, and Complete. This is a big box set, and it looks like it's 2 volumes within a box. It's everything from Bloom County from 1980 to 1989, and this is going for $99.99. Bloom County basically defined the 1980s for me, one of the defining features of that decade. And I mean, I've got a lot of individual collections of Bloom County, so I'm not going to get this. But if you're a Bloom County fan, completist, or, if you're just not that familiar with the original Bloom County, because, last year, Berg Breath had brought Bloom County back, thank goodness. But this is a great collection, and it's pricey, but it's complete.
Yep. And then on the next page, if you want, you can get the brand spanking new day collection, which is new material that Breathed's been putting out on Facebook.
Yeah, I think that's his second volume of the new stuff.
Yep.
So you say you go to 166 next?
Yeah. Since we're on the subject of collections, I know this was announced a while ago, but I'm glad to see we're getting the first collection of Lynn Johnston's For Better or For Worse library, which is a classic comic strip series, but one that I think bears reading straight through, since there was continuity to it. The characters aged, and I think somewhat in real time,
right?
And
for most of the original run, yeah,
right, and it was a series too that Johnston came back to later on in the run, came back to the earlier strips and did some more stuff with them. So it's an interesting series in terms of how it progressed. It's a funny series, but I also get to see how how the Patterson family grows up, which I'm glad to see these collected, because I don't know if there's a lot of collections out there in print still for better or for worse.
And this is hardcover as well.
Yeah.
After that, I go to 168, the top shelf section.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple things in top shelf within IDW. On 168 is Tara O'Connor's Roots. Are you familiar with Tara O'Connor?
No.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with her work either, but this looks interesting. It says, on a journey to the old world, she discovers a whole new world. After a messy year of heartbreak and setbacks, Tara sets off to Ireland in search of clues to her family's ancestry, but what she found wasn't at all what she expected. Some of it has to do with the lack of records, but a lot of it has to do with John, the charming cartoonist she met on Twitter. Wrapped in a real family history and set amongst the natural beauty of the Irish countryside, Roots is a classic romantic comedy adventure and a page-turning account of a young woman finding herself. You know, it's interesting in that, I think the solicit's fine, but I'm not sure if I would have paid the same kind of attention to this book had it not been a top-shelf title.
Yeah. It's, well, it looks like it's probably autobiographical.
I don't know. I thought it was fictional.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering because the character has the same name as the artist. So
yeah. Well, when it comes to fiction, much of it's based on real life anyhow. So at what point does fiction become more autobiographical or vice versa?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Other than that, it doesn't signal itself as being autobiographical, but I just kind of was making that assumption. So, yeah, I don't know. It looks interesting. I had that marked.
Mm-hmm. And something similar, I guess, my reaction on page 169, and this is Bottled by Chris Gooch.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks like another work of fiction. Jane is sick of her dead-end life in the suburbs and desperate for a change. Her old friend Natalie made it out living in Japan as a fashion model. Now, as Natalie comes back to town on business, Jane sees a way for her friend to do her a favor, whether she likes it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently Chris Gooch is a young Australian cartoonist. It says this is his debut. Yeah.
And we do only get a little bit of art, so but that summary, that solicit, I think is interesting enough for me to want to check that out.
Yep.
And since we're on that page, we get issue 3 of Gumballs by Aaron Nations.
Yep. We reviewed the first issue a few months back.
Yep.
We liked it.
Mm-hmm. And that's all I have in IDW, so if you have more.
Yeah, just a few things. On page 172, we have the next collection in Craig Yo's Haunted Horror series. This one is going to be titled Nightmare of Doom and Much, Much More.
Yep.
And then on the next page, 173, these are a couple of books in, I guess, a new series that IDW is doing called The Little Book of Knowledge. The first one is Little Book of Knowledge, Heavy Metal, and this is by Jacques de Pierrepont. And then the other one solicited on that same page is The Little Book of Knowledge, Tattoos by Jerome Perriot, with cover art by Alfred. By the way, the art on the Heavy Metal one is Hervé Bourgis. I'm not sure how you pronounce the name. But from the names of the writers and artists, I'm wondering if this is a French or a Franco-Belgian series that IDW is starting to publish in English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was curious about that too. And these are tiny books. They're 72 pages, but they're also 5.5 by 7.7 inches. So
Little Book of Knowledge.
Yeah. So they're literally little. They're thin and short.
Right, and they're very informative. So, for instance, with the heavy metal one, the solicit says, learn to identify the many tribes of the international heavy metal community from thrash to black metal, master the codes from the signs, the signs of the horns to the Diablos in Muscla, understand how blah, 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 blah. So you got to get a sense of what this is. Same thing with the tattoo one. You can learn about, the history and practices of tattooing. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that IDW was doing this as a series, but I guess they are.
Yeah, is it IDW or is it Top Shelf? I guess it's IDW.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention in IDW is on that following page, 174, and this is a new printing, or I guess a new collection of Sam Keith's Zero Girl. Mm-hmm. I think this originally came out in, was it, 2001? And I didn't read the original, but I do like the work of Sam Keith. So this is something that I'll consider getting if I'm able.
Okay.
Do you know about this?
I didn't read it when it came out, but I remember when it came out. I remember it existing.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then Fallen Angel is on the next page. Written by Peter David with art by David Lopez, Fernando Blanco, and Nathan Earring. And this was, I think, did IDW originally publish Fallen Angel?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
I know they didn't do Zero Girl.
No, it says underneath, the long-running series that launched at DC Comics comes back to shelves in this handsome deluxe collection.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so I do remember this. So this is another one of those series that we see every once in a while where a creator did publish the work for DC or Marvel, but somehow has managed to get the rights back and is now reprinting it with a new publisher.
Right.
Yep.
So if you're done with IDW, we can mosey on over to Image.
Yep.
And where do you start?
I start pretty much right away on page 188. Last month we had the Mage, the Hero Denied 0 issue, so now we get the actual first issue of that. And it's the first of a 15-part series. So in keeping with the other two volumes of Mage, each one of them has been 15 issues as well. So this will run to be then about a 45 issue series with plus 2 0 issues in there. But I'm really looking forward to this. It's been a long time, and we get 4 pages or so of preview art that shows kind of what Kevin Matchstick is up to today.
And then the next solicit in Image is on 190, page 190, and this is Redlands, #1. This is a new horror title from Jordi Belair, who does the writing, and then Vanessa L. Del Rey, the art. It looks interesting as a horror title, but another thing that drew my attention to this is the fact that Jordi Belair is writing this. Because she's, primarily known for the art, I guess specifically as a colorist is where she's really made her name. Do you know what other writing she's done?
No.
Okay. I don't know if this is her first or just one of her few.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like Vanessa Del Rey's art too.
Definitely,
I liked it on other things that she's done, and so this could be this could be a good series. I highlighted that too.
Yeah, and we do get 4 condensed pages of sample art on page 191.
Yeah. I actually got a lot of stuff in Image because there seems to be a lot of new series. There's always a lot of new series, but stuff that's notable, I guess, more than that. And I think that's holds true on the next page. On page 192,
right, is
the debut of an anthology called Annual.
Clever title.
With stories by Joe Casey and an art by various creators, including Luke Parker, Nathan Fox, Jim Rugg, Wilfredo Torres, and others. And some of this is reprinting stuff that previously appeared elsewhere, like the Joe Casey, Nathan Fox story was in Playboy, it says. And so I'm curious about this. I like this idea of a single creator, single writer anthology with different artists working with him. But I also like the fact that this cover is plays off of the cover of I think it's Batman Annual number 8 or Batman Annual number 9, which had a Trevor Von Eden cover that had this big kind of solar thing on it, in the same color scheme, and the same design at the top of the cover is the old design for DC's annuals. So that looks like fun.
And this is going to come out once a year. Thus the title. And then
it's 128 pages too for $10. So
right.
It's a good price for a pretty sizable book.
Yeah, it is. So if you look at this in the new issues coming out in the new series section of Image, and you think, oh my God, $9.99. No, look at the page count. And also it's coming out once a year, so you'll get your money's worth. And then on that next page, 193, is another number 1 issue of a new series, and this is Elsewhere number 1, written by Jay Farber with art by Sumai Kesgan and Ron Riley. And it says, mysteriously transported to a strange new world filled with flying beasts and alien civilizations, Amelia desperately struggles to return home. Along the way, she forges alliances and makes enemies as she goes from aviator to freedom fighter in a rebellion against a merciless warlord. So, Amelia Earhart.
Yep. Yet another speculation about whatever happened to Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, she got lost in this fantasy world.
And,
Jay Farber has done a lot of stuff, and I guess one of the more recent things he's done is the Copperhead series for the past couple of years. He just strikes me as one of those journeyman writers. He does a lot of stuff. He does a lot of really good comics, many various different titles, different kinds of stories. But he never rises to the level of other writers. But you can always count on him. He's always consistent. His storytelling is always solid. And it's just a shame he doesn't get more attention for his more creator-owned stuff.
Right.
And then where do you go next in Image?
I jumped to 205, so if you have anything before then.
I think that one thing that I was going to mention on page 197, I guess more in passing than anything, is Ghost Station Zero. And this is part of that Codename Babushka series. And was it last year they had that miniseries, Codename Babushka?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't read it, and that's not the reason that I wanted to mention this. I've been noticing, though, And this is before Trump was elected president. I've been noticing more and more comics that deal with Russia, and Russia in a more Cold War-like sense, whether it takes place during the Cold War or is post-Cold War, but it has that Cold War feel to it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's up with that.
Oh, well, yeah, it could be a generational thing. That's where the nostalgia is.
Mm-hmm. Or, people are just wanting the almost kind of clear-cut good guy, bad guy, black and white kind of dynamic going on, as opposed to what we have now in terms of terrorism, right? Where something that is a little sketchy and ill-defined, and you don't know where the threat lies.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I also wanted to mention on page 200, there's a new series or new miniseries, The Hard Place. This is by Doug Wagner, story with art by Nick Rummel and Charlie Kirchhoff. It seems interesting. It says, after 5 years in prison, A.J. Gurney, a legendary wheelman in Detroit, has decided it's time to go straight. He returns home to work in his father's garage and disappears into anonymity. But during a visit to the bank, AJ is recognized by two violent bank robbers, and they demand AJ be their getaway driver. So, this is one of those classic crime stories, right? Someone is out, and despite whether he wants it or not, he's pulled back in.
Right. So it's got this nice crime noir feel to it.
Mm-hmm. And then on that following page 201, we have a #1 issue of Image Plus. Now, you say, well, Image Plus has been around for a while. Why is this a new #1? Because they're doing the whole volume thing, which annoys me with regular comics. But for something like Image Plus, it ramps up the annoyance for me.
Huh. Okay. I see why they're doing it in a sense, because Volume 1 had the Walking Dead serial in it,
and this has a new one, doesn't it?
And this has Witches.
Witches, right?
Going to run through this volume, so it makes sense if you just want to get the Witches issues, or you just wanted to get the Walking Dead ones, you would get that.
Right.
That individual volume.
But the other content that makes up the majority of each issue of Image Plus remains, for the most part, unchanged, right? So there's still previews, there's still interviews and articles, write-ups. So, again, I don't see the justification here outside of, a new #1.
Okay.
And for a publication that seems more supplemental than otherwise.
Well, I am just going to let you have your rant.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
I am not going to try to dissuade you from feeling that way.
Okay. Maybe now we can go on to, where did you say, 206?
205.
205.
205, yeah. Savage Town, which is written by Declan Shalvey and Philip Barrett, and drawn by Philip Barrett. And another crime story with in Limerick City, Jimmy Hardy Savage is a gangster on the rise, facing trouble from all sides with the local cops' rival gangs, his best mate, and his mammy all out to stick a knife in him. Will the bollocks live long enough to get to the top? More importantly, will he pay me back for the $5 I gave him last week? So this is an original graphic novel set in Ireland, where I know Shalvey is in Ireland, and he and Jordy Belair have a studio there in Dublin, and they're a couple. So they both have, and in fact they both have books debuting in this issue as well.
And she also, I guess, she does the coloring for this.
Yeah. Okay, and then I go to 207.
Right.
And this is one of the books I'm most excited about this month, which is Rich Tomaso's Spy Seal. Do you follow Rich on social media?
Yeah, I on Instagram, I see all the things that he posts, and he's been posting tons of stuff on Spicy.
Yeah. So, and I think it's a character he created a while ago.
I think he created when he was really young, maybe in high school.
Yeah, and he's come back to it, and just the stuff that he's posting is really got me excited about this. So, having that kind of social media presence, I feel like is working in his favor. So this is going to be the first volume or the first issue of an ongoing series. I really do hope that this one sticks around for a while because I think it could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the way that they describe it in the solicit, it says it's reminiscent of the adventures of Tintin and Usagi Yojimbo.
Yeah.
Now, we had Rich on the show last year, in fact, not long after Heroes Con, to talk about She-Wolf. Maybe at some point we can have him back on to talk about Spy Seal.
Yeah, that would be great. He's going to be at Heroes Con too, so we can stop by and say hi.
Yeah, and we can maybe talk with him about setting something up.
Yep. And then I go to 209.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And that's, another writer-centric anthology, Tim Seeley's Action Figure Collection Volume 1. This collects a bunch of one-shots and short stories that Tim Seeley wrote quite a while ago, actually, for many of these. Jack Kraken, Agent of Him, Colt Noble, Animalian, Super Beasts, Dead Star Divas. So with art by Sophie Campbell, Sean Dove, Jim Terry, and Tim Seeley himself. Mm-hmm. And I really like the fact that this is called Tim Seeley's Action Figure Collection because Tim is an action figure aficionado. A couple times I've hung out with him at cons, he's often shopping for action figures, some for himself, some to share with his brother Steve, who does the cover of this issue. And he did the Masters of the Universe book a little while ago. So I like that title. But I'm glad to see this because there's all this kind of loose stuff out there that he's done over the years, and I like this idea of this, and along with Joe Casey's book of having a venue for a writer-centric collection of shorter works. Mm-hmm.
Now, that's all in terms of the comics that I have in Image. Do you have anything?
Nope.
Yeah, the only other Image thing I wanted to mention, and this is on page 237. Remember when we had Brian K. Vaughan on for an interview a little over 2 years ago, and at one point we had mentioned something about the Lion Cat shirt selling out, and he said he was surprised by that. Well, for those of you who did not get a Lion Cat t-shirt when it was originally released a number of years ago, they're coming out with more. So you can get a Lion Cat t-shirt for $20 unless you're larger than extra large.
Yep. So I'd be looking at $23 there. Okay. So, so then we go to the back half.
Right. And where do you begin?
I begin it with AdHouse on page 255. So if you go before then.
Yes. On 246, this is under Aardvark-Vanaheim, a Dave Sim product, Batvark. And so here we have a Cerebus parody of Batman. So, in the original Cerebus, there were quite a number of parodies. So this is nothing new for the world in the mind of Dave Sim. But there's this, I may check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like it also includes some Cerebus in Hell material as well. So Yeah, I'm curious to see what that is.
And then after that, AdHouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what.
And that's on page
255.
Yep.
And this is something. Actually, we also got an email about this just the other day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Screwed Up by Konstantin Stashenko. Jeremy is constantly down on his luck. Is a constantly down on his luck guy who has the brilliant idea to propose to his ex at the place where they first met, a very public and busy subway platform in New York. Things do not go according to plan, and then things get horrifically worse. And if the cover is a bunch of people looking out a window of a subway car in horror as blood splatters up the subway, up the side of the car, spelling out "screwed up." So I have a feeling that might be an indicator of what goes horribly wrong,
right,
at this proposal. So this could be a fun dark comedy,
right. And the thing that almost threw me at first is, and the only art we see is the cover. But from what I can tell of the art, it looks like something that maybe a younger reader would appreciate, or something geared toward a younger reader, kind of like an Adventure Time, right? Mm-hmm. Or a regular show, or SpongeBob. But according to the solicit and the what seems to be blood at the bottom, definitely not for kids.
Yeah, it almost has like a Jason Shiga quality to the art that made me think that was what I kind of thought of, and that would be then more appropriate for that that type of story than Adventure Time would be.
Right. And then after that, I go to page 266. Do you have anything before then?
No, I don't.
Okay. On 266, Moonshot, the Indigenous Comics Collection, Volume 2. Underneath it is Moonshot Indigenous Comics Collection Volume 1 that came out, I don't know, about a month or two ago. This is a collection of stories. It's edited by Hope Nicholson. And so we have another volume of this. It says, the highly anticipated second volume of the multiple award-winning collection is here. Moonshot, the Indigenous Comics Collection, Volume 2, brings you even more original comic book stories written by Indigenous authors from across North America.
Great.
Yep. After that, I go to the next page, 267.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I'm in Amazing Slave Labor.
Yeah, same here. And it's interesting in that it's a rarity that we mention anything from Amazing Inc. Slave Labor Graphics. Because usually if they're soliciting something, it's a resolicit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a new one.
Yeah, Josephine by Kevin Sacco. This is a wordless civil rights area tale of a young boy with a complicated family life who accompanies his family's domestic, Josephine, from his Upper West Side comforts to her neighborhood haunts in Harlem. I like this idea of I like the idea of wordless comics anyway. Mm-hmm. But this idea of a child's eye view of this civil rights era story, I think is really interesting. Right.
Now, it says that this is the Kevin Sacco's first work since The Plane Story, and I looked that up. I'm not familiar with The Plane Story. Are you?
No.
But, yeah, this definitely looks like something worth checking out.
Mm-hmm.
I go next to 290.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay, and this is under Big Planet Retrofit Comics.
Right.
Iceland by Yuichi Yokoyama.
Mm-hmm.
A new surrealist tale by the creator of Neo Manga, the critically acclaimed Yuichi Yokoyama. His frenetic visual style contrasts with the taciturn pace of the story and the dialogue as a group of friends wander the high-latitude areas of the strange, icy far north looking for someone. So, and this is interesting in that you and I are on Retrofit Big Planets' mailing list, but we haven't gotten this yet. Or at least I haven't. Have you?
Right. No, I was going to ask you about that because I just got a package from them, but it did not have this in it.
So I'm assuming that we'll get this. And this is something, we could either discuss this on our show, or it would definitely fit in with what Shay and I do on the manga series.
Yeah.
In fact, it would give us the opportunity to look at some of Yokoyama's earlier stuff, which we've toyed around discussing before, but we just haven't gotten around to yet. And on that same page you mentioned earlier with Josephine and the wordless comic, there seems to be something similar going with the issue number 71 of SpongeBob Comics. It's called the Will You Please Be Quiet issue. And, SpongeBob is, I don't know, I don't pick it up often, but whenever I do, it's fun. Do you ever read SpongeBob Comics?
Only usually in the Halloween issues when we do the Halloween show or their free comic book day comic.
Yeah. I think that they're really clever. And so this seems to be in that tradition.
Yep.
Where do you go next?
I go to Boom and page 294.
Okay, me too.
And this is the first issue of a new miniseries called Mech, Cadet, U, which is written by Greg Pak and drawn by Takeshi Miyazawa. The two of them had collaborated before on the Hulk. They co-created Amadeus Cho, and so this looks like a fun all ages adventure comic. As it says, once a year, giant robots from outer space come to Earth and bond with young cadets from the elite Sky Corp Academy to defend the world from the terrifying aliens known as the Sharg. It's a great honor to be chosen, but this year the wrong kid was picked. So I like that there's a kind of classic manga anime hook to this. Young kid, giant robot. We've seen that a lot, but in a lot of different iterations, but I think this still looks like fun.
Right.
And I like Miyazawa's art a lot. I liked what he did at Marvel, so be curious about that.
Yeah, I want to check this out as well.
That's it for Boom.
Yeah. I have something on 318. I don't know if you have anything before that.
No.
Okay, on page 318, this is under Candlewick Press, and this is Poe, Stories and Poems, and it says the writers are Gareth Hines and Edgar Allan Poe, with art by Gareth Hines. So I guess he's the only one adapting these various stories and poems. So it's another collection of adaptations from Edgar Allan Poe, which, I've done quite a bit of work on this, and I'm always fascinated with any new Poe adaptation. He is still, I think, the most adapted American author in comics. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. So, all the classics seem to be adapted here. The Cask of Amontillado, the Mask of the Red Death, Pit and the Pendulum, The Telltale Heart, The Raven, The Bells. So it's kind of like a greatest hits of Poe in comics form again. So I'm curious to see how Hines does this.
Yeah.
And also, it's coming out from Candlewick Press, and my experience with Candlewick Press is that most of the titles, at least that I'm familiar with, seem to be for younger readers. So I'm curious to see the tone of this book.
Yeah. If I remember right, I think that Candlewick is kind of that's their main audience. Is the young readers. So, okay. I don't have anything till Dynamite. So if you have anything before Dynamite.
Yeah. Before Dynamite on page 322, this is under the Darby Pop Publishing, page. This is Things You Shouldn't Remember. This is written by Louis Ralden and art by Mariano, Elici. It says dozens of people from all across the United States suddenly find themselves recalling random things, song lyrics, places, and events that seem to have been erased from both collective memory and recorded history. Fearing the spread of a virus like plague, a mysterious group known as the Handlers is tasked with hunting and destroying those who recollect. But does the end justify the means? And what if you were the one whose mind was unwittingly filled with things you shouldn't remember? That's interesting. It's a twist on someone losing their memory. Here you have people who are possessing memories that they didn't originally have.
Yeah, it seems like nobody has, right?
So I like that premise.
Yeah, that is an interesting premise that you've got like songs and other pop culture references that have been wiped out of collective memory other than these people who are recalling them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So where in Dynamite are you focusing?
I started on 324 with the revival of Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, by Marguerite Bennett, written by Marguerite Bennett and Christina Trujillo, and art by Moritat. And Dynamite's been doing a lot of this lately, of they're having a zero issue that debuts at 25 cents. They did this for Sword Quest, for example, recently, and they did it for The Shadow a little bit before that. So you can get a little feeling of what's going to happen in this series. This return of this jungle girl, Sheena. I'm especially interested to see it because of the creative team behind it. There are a lot of crappy jungle girl comics out there. You can scroll through, or you can page through the catalog and find, Boundless or whatever it is.
Right.
But Sheena is the original, and I think Dynamite's put a good team behind it.
So let's see what they do with that property.
Yep. And then I go to 328.
Speaking of Shadow.
Yeah. And a new Shadow series written by Cy Spurrier and drawn by Daniel HDR. And this brings the Shadow into the current era, which so most of the stuff that Dynamite has done has had the Shadow in his original 1930s and 40s milieu.
Mm-hmm.
So the last Shadow story in contemporary times I remember reading is Howard Chaykin's, which I really liked a lot, though it was pretty controversial at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll definitely want to check this out. And I like Cy Spurrier as a writer. So there's Dynamite's has done a lot with the Shadow over the years, but I like to see what different creators do.
Mm-hmm.
And then on a couple pages later, on 330, is a new James Bond one-shot, Moneypenny, written by Jody Houser and drawn by Jacob Edgar. And I've liked what Jody Houser's been doing on Mother Panic and Faith. So I am I'm curious to see how this focus on the character Moneypenny goes in this comic.
And you and I have talked about doing an episode where we look at these James Bond Dynamite titles.
Yeah.
So I still think that that's something we should do.
Yes.
If we wait too long, then it may be a little prohibitive in terms of the amount of material.
Yeah, well, when we could do it for that, we could do it for the first issue of Kill Chain, which is coming out next month. And then I have one other thing in Dynamite, which is on page 335.
Okay.
And that is as part of their Dynamite's licensing of Atari properties. This is one of the things I was hoping they would do. They're collecting the comic books that were packaged with Atari cartridges back in the day. And in particular, they're doing the Sword Quest series. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about this is because I never got all of the Sword Quest games. I think I had the first one and that was it. So I never got to see these other comics. And they were drawn by George Perez, who was at the time especially was my favorite artist. So I was always bummed that there was one George Perez comic that I never got, or two, with these Sword Quest books. So now we can get them. I'll see if they're any good. They're written by Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. Mm-hmm. And then it also includes the Yar's Revenge comic, which I did have, which is weird. But what I'm then hoping this means is that maybe we'll see Atari Force. I have all the Atari Force comics that were packaged with Atari games. I do have those. And those have some really nice art by Gil Kane and Ross Andrew. So I do hope those get republished too, but I don't need those the way I'm really interested in seeing the Sword Quest stuff.
I see. I didn't have any game system growing up, so all this is foreign to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, and then so that's it. That's it for Dynamite for me.
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention in Dynamite on page 339 is the trade paperback of Grand Passion. You and I discussed that last year, the first issue, and so now it is collected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, James Robinson and Tom Feister's comic. Yep.
And then after that, I go to page 350.
So do I.
Okay. In fact, let me get there. Okay, here we are. And this is Lark's Killer. Yes. This is written by Bill Willingham with art by Mark Dos Santos. It says Lark is a runaway living rough on the streets of L.A. when suddenly she's transported to an alien world of swords, dragons, and magic where everyone wants her dead, and she likely won't live long enough to find out why. So Bill Willingham back in a world where he seems fairly comfortable, the world of fantasy, and characters from one experience or reality being transported or experiencing events in another kind of world. Mm-hmm. And in fact, at the beginning of this June issue of Previews, there is a short interview with Bill Willingham.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this will be interesting to see. It's coming out from Devil's Due First Comics. Mm-hmm. So maybe it'll be a good. I don't know if they've had a lot of hits out of that publisher yet, so it might be interesting to see if this sticks. Mm-hmm.
And then I next go to Drawn and Quarterly.
Okay, so I stop at 254 or 354, excuse me. But slightly before Drawn and Quarterly to the Dover Publications piece, because Dover Publications, we've talked about how they've been reprinting comics from that 70s and 80s independent comic era that have gotten long out of print, and this is one that I'm really interested in seeing again, which is Don Simpson's Border Worlds. And so I also follow Don Simpson on social media. We happened to meet at a conference in Columbus a few years ago. And I actually was sharing a cab with him, and I didn't even know who he was. And just a bunch of us got into a cab together, and he pulls out his iPad and starts showing me new Megaton Man pages, and that kind of blew me away. So yeah, I'm glad. I think Border Worlds was a neat series when it originally came out from Kitchen Sink, and so it also has new material that Simpson's added. So he's been talking about this a lot on social media. about his anticipation of this coming out. So I'm glad to see it solicited, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Cool. And then right underneath that is, I think, the only new title solicited this month in the Drunning Quarterly section. I mean, they have solicited. Well, no, I think there's a second one too, the new Moomin title. So yeah, those are the two. But I wasn't going to focus on the new Moomin title. The one above it, The Customer Is Always Wrong by Mimi Pond.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a follow-up to her Over Easy, which came out a few years ago. And it's been a while since. Did you read Over Easy?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and it's been a while since I've read it. I can't remember if this is dealing with the same protagonist. It seems to. It's got the same setting. Things take place in a diner or a restaurant. So that's what The Customer Is Always Wrong. It says it's the saga of a young, naive artist named Madge working in a restaurant of charming drunks, junkies, thieves, and creeps. Oakland in the late 70s is a cheap and quirky haven for eccentrics, and Mimi Pond told the tales of the fascinating sleazeball characters that surround young Madge into her workaday waitressing life. And I know that was a very similar setting to Over Easy, but I can't remember if Madge was the protagonist of Over Easy. Can you?
No, because Over Easy, when I was reading this, I thought my memory of Over Easy, I don't have it anymore, was that it was more overtly autobiographical.
Right, without being straight autobiography.
Well,
a masked autobiography. In other words,
maybe more autobiography than this looks to be, though.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
But I don't know who I can't remember if Madge is the protagonist of Over Easy.
Well, it's solicited right below,
but it doesn't tell you who.
No, but because I think again, I think Over Easy is more of a overt memoir, and so anyway, yeah, and I noted that comic coming out too. It's good to see new Mimi Pond stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, Fantagraphics.
Yeah. And that's on page 358.
Yeah, 358 and 359. And as almost always, almost everything at Fantagraphics solicited is worth getting. Mm-hmm. I think one of the most notable solicits for this month is Love and Rockets number 3. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a really fun cover that Jaime does. Mm-hmm. Although, and I think, is there in the bottom right of that cover, is that an image by Gilbert? I can't tell.
Yeah, I can't tell either. Yeah, I can't tell either.
Yeah, and if that's the case, that's a rarity. Mm-hmm. That they don't take turns where, one does, all of the front and then the other does the entirety of the back. Yep.
Yeah, I like the solicit for this. Number one, it lets us know that there's going to be a follow up to the punk reunion that's been running through last couple volumes of Love and Rockets New Stories up to issues 1 and 2 of the new volume. So that story is going to continue, and the Animus situation has gotten too big for Reunited Sisters Lumina and Isla. So that'll be interesting. One of the things I'm curious about is if those two stories, if the Animus stuff is going to just remain independent, or is that going to kind of run into the Locus stuff as it has in the past?
I don't know.
And then with Gilbert's stuff, we're getting a continuation of Fritz's story with her reunited twin daughters, and it teases that we get to meet a classic Palomar character or 3. Well, Luba appears in the panels the sample panels to the side, so that's at least one of them.
Right. And in fact, I when I read that solicit, I was wondering if the writer was aware that they were going to use the art samples solicit that they actually did use, because, you know, when they say you're going to meet a classic character, a Palomar character or three, I mean, obviously, you know, Luba is the first candidate that comes to mind, but because they don't use the name Luba, I wondered if the writer thought, okay, I'll be a little masked here, but then right beside the solicit is sample art, and it's Luba. So yeah, looking forward as always to the next 11 Rockets. And then right under that is something that I've been looking forward to, and this is volume 2 of Moto Hagio's Otherworld Barbara. The first volume of this came out, I can't remember if it was late summer or very early fall of last year. And Shay and I discussed that on our monthly manga series. And so I was wondering when the second volume was going to come out. Now we have an answer in July.
Yep.
So that's a good story. I'm looking forward to seeing the follow-up. In fact, I need to go back and read that first volume just to refresh myself on this story. And then underneath that is a new book from Noah Van Sciver, who does the art, and this is also by Paul Buell, Johnny Appleseed.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff in this Fantagraphics section. So.
Right. Yeah, I'm interested in this Johnny Appleseed, the team up between Buell and Noah Van Sciver. You know, Buell does a lot of histories and biographies. So, you know, this is one obviously on the famous character, the figure of Johnny Appleseed. And it's got Van Sciver art. Now, right next to that is another solicit. This one is for Trina Robbins. It says Last Girl Standing. Is this a book of prose?
Yeah, it is. It says it's a heavily illustrated memoir.
Okay.
So it's not comics.
Okay.
But, you know, Trina Robbins was involved. She herself created some of the more significant comics of the underground era. She was involved in women's comics and has done some great work with as a comics historian. So that should be a really good memoir.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know if maybe there were comics in this, but it's just illustrated memoir.
Heavily,
right. So
yeah. And then speaking of Noah Van Sciver, actually, he is the artist on the All-Time Comics Blind Justice #2. That is below that, below Johnny Appleseed. So All-Time Comics is continued. It's a double-sized special, so 52 pages, penciled by Noah Van Sciver and inked by Al Milgram. Story by Josh Baer.
On the next page, what is that, 359, you have more Fantagraphics goodness. There is Cosplayer Perfect Collection in softcover because the hardbound came out last year. So if you didn't get that, then you can get a softcover of that. Also on that page is Richard Sala's The Bloody Cardinal.
That looks good.
And then DJ Bryant's Unreal City.
Yep.
And I'm not familiar with DJ Bryant. Are you?
No. But it says the artwork echoes Jaime Hernandez and Dan Klaus. So
yeah,
I'm be curious to see this. And it's 5 short stories.
It says about relationships, addressing gender, narcissism, marriage, subjectivity, objectification as the characters attempt to make sense of love, sex, art, and life.
Okay. And I think that's all I had to mark, though there's a lot of stuff in that Fantagraphics section that we're not covering. One
other one that I thought sounded really interesting in the Fantagraphics section, this is Education by John Hankiewicz. In this experimental and rewarding graphic novel, chronology and permanence are in flux while surreal illusions weave in and out of lucid states. remarkably held together by John Hankelwick's confident, clean line and cross-hatching, much like Here by Richard McGuire. Education is a time fracture stream of consciousness told by a veteran cartoonist in his poetic prime. And I looked up the author, and he's done other things. I'm just not familiar with him.
Yeah.
So, as we've said, a lot of good stuff in Fantagraphics this month.
Yep. I jumped to Lion Forge on 380, so if you have anything before then.
Yeah, a few things. On page 361, under Fanfare Ponetmont, is Jiro Takiguchi's Venice. And also, I don't think we've mentioned this, but this is Manga Month. And so throughout the catalog, anytime they solicit manga, it has the official Manga Month stamp on it, and that has one. Also on that page, under the second section, is another in their Science Comics series. This one is Science Comics Plagues, Microscopic Battlefields.
Mm-hmm.
And those are fun.
Yes.
And speaking of younger readers, this is, I think, a first for Humanoids on page 366. They're starting a new line, Humanoids Kids. It's a family-friendly series of books. And in fact, I was talking about a week or so ago with the publicist at Humanoids, and he gave me a heads up about the new Humanoids Kids series, because, most of the titles that they put out is not for younger readers.
Right.
But they wanted to do something that could be all ages, and this is, I guess, the first title for that series. This is Gregory and the Gargoyles by Dennis Pierre Filippi, with art by J. Etienne and Silvio Camboni.
Yep.
So worth checking out if you're a fan of Humanoids, but you can't share your love of Humanoids with your kids. This is for you.
Yeah, and just since we're on that page, I didn't originally have this marked, but just to the left of that, Hermes Press is putting out a collection of the complete Dark Shadow newspaper series, or Dark Shadows, excuse me, which only ran for a year. But the art by Ken Bald is beautiful. Mm-hmm. In fact, I didn't even know this was coming out until I looked at previews, and I was actually looking at some of the art just the other day. Somebody had posted some online. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful looking series.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then one other thing before we get to, what page did you say you were on?
380.
380, yes. And this is on 373 in the Kodansha section. One of the challenges with Kodansha and other manga publishers is that in their solicits, if you're not familiar with the title, I don't know, I always kind of hesitate to jump on at volume number 20 or volume number 15. But this is a series that they're soliciting the first volume, and plus the solicit seems interesting. This is Love and Lies, Volume 1 by Museo Tsumugi, and the solicit reads, when you turn 16, the government will assign your marriage partner. This dystopian manga about teen love and defiance is a sexy, funny, and dramatic new hit. Yukari is dull. He doesn't even stand out enough to be bullied. He's just a generally lower middle-class kid. He's in love with Misaki, the most popular girl in school. There's just one problem. He's 15, 1 year away from receiving his government-assigned marriage partner. He normally wouldn't have the courage to defy the law, but his sickly classmate, Rurani, still believes in love and won't stop goading him into confessing his feelings. So it seems like an innocent premise, but one that might be fun. And if you're looking for a new Kodansha series to jump onto at the outset, then Love and Lies might be for you.
Yeah, that sounds like Logan's Run, but younger.
Mm-hmm. And then I go where you go also, page 380.
Yeah, so we're seeing more stuff from Lion Forge. So I'm really curious to see what this publisher does. And on page 380 is Ghost Money, which stood out to me because it's written by Terry Smolderin, who is a comic scholar
and historian. Yeah.
And drawn by Dominique Bertel. And so it's described as Homeland meets Mr. Robot, basically a political thriller. So I'll be curious to see how this goes.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this is another title that was originally in French and now is translated.
Could be.
Mm-hmm. A number of publishers do that. I know that Titan has done that as well.
Yep.
So this is worth checking out. And there's also another new title from Lion Forge on page 382.
Yeah, the Incidentals, which is, it says, the fourth monthly series from the Catalyst Prime universe. And this is written by Joe Casey, so Joe Casey shows up again.
Right. Now, it says the Catalyst universe. Was Casey doing some of that stuff over at Image a while back?
The Catalyst Prime is Lion Forge's superhero universe.
Okay, so that's theirs. What I'm thinking of something else then, and that Casey may have done elsewhere. Okay. So
I'm not. I can't. I mean, he's done other stuff that maybe starting new characters off or something, but I can't remember. But he's doing this, and he's doing Excel.
I've got one more thing in the Lion Forge section, and this is on page 385. It's from their Roar imprint. It's Water Memory. This is written by Matthew Renes and art by Valerie Vernet. It's a younger reader or a teen title, and it sounds really interesting. In fact, it's something that I think maybe Gwen and Paul for the Young Reader series may want to check out. It says, a new life begins for Marion when her mother inherits an old family house and decides to make it their new home. With its own private beach and a view of the sea, the house has all the markings of a happy new life. But when Marion discovers strange rock carvings nearby and learns that a sinister-looking lighthouse watchman may be part of a local legend come to life, it becomes clear that things are not as idyllic as they seemed. Now, the other things we were talking about in Lion Forge were single issues of new series. This is an original graphic novel.
Mm-hmm. And it says volume 1, so.
Yeah. Maybe more story to come, I guess.
Yep.
After that, I go to page 389.
Yes.
Okay, so what on page 389 were you wanting to point out?
Well, I start under Mariner books with Fetch, How a Bad Dog Brought Me Home by Nicole J. George. Mm-hmm. And so this is a memoir about her life with this dysfunctional Shar-Pei Corgi mix that she had when she was a teenager.
Now, did you get a review copy of this book?
No, did you?
Yeah, I got it just the other day, in fact.
Okay.
So I haven't had the chance to. I thumbed through it, but I haven't read any of it. Mm-hmm.
And Mariner probably most famously put out Fun Home, so I'm curious about this. Another interesting memoir from them.
Yeah. And then right beside that is a new book from NBM, another biography, Sartre, by Matilda Remedier and I can't read that other name.
Anais Depaumier.
Depaumier, okay, yes. And so if you want to learn a little bit about Jean-Paul Sartre in comics form, then this book is definitely for you.
Yep.
No exit, baby.
Yeah, and then under Microcosm, they have a hardcover collection of Henry and Glenn Forever by Tom Neely and others, using this time the Jim Rugg cover, which is Henry and Glenn in a kind of Tom of Finland style, which I really appreciated. And then below that too is the Henry and Glenn adult coloring book, which everybody's getting for Christmas from me this year.
I know. I'm wanting to see what this looks like.
Yep. And that's all. Yeah, that's all I had there. And then I go to No Brow on 391.
Yep, me too.
With a new book, A Castle in England, written by James Rhodes, with art by Isaac Lenkowitz and various.
Jamie Rhodes.
Oh, sorry, Jamie Rhodes. Yeah. And so it's 5 short stories that take place over different eras in the 14th century castle's history: medieval, Elizabethan, Georgian, Victorian, and Edwardian, with a different artist for each section, including Isabel Greenberg.
Right. Yeah, there's that. And, earlier we've mentioned collections that have different artists, but the writing is a single individual. This is the same case here, where Jamie Rhodes does all 5 of these stories. Another thing that I'm really interested about in terms of this book is that it sounds like it may be something like a story cycle.
Right.
Because it's all based on the same location or the same castle over time.
Right.
So I'd be curious to look at this and just see how closely linked all of those stories are.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to be interested about with this book.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss this on a future episode. And a book under that is another No Brow Press title that's going to be coming out later this year. And this is by Hamish Steele, Pantheon, the True Story of the Egyptian Deities.
Okay.
After that, there's the Oni section. And anything in Oni tickle your fancy?
Yeah, I had a couple things.
Okay.
Go to 394 with Dead of Winter, which is an adaptation of a tabletop game. But I wanted to note it because it's written by Kyle Starks and drawn by Gabo. And Kyle Starks loves dogs. And so the fact that this is a story focusing on a dog, I think is right up his alley.
Now that I think of it, when we had him on the show about a month and a half ago, for #1 issue of Rock Candy Mountain,
right.
he mentioned this game, Dead of Winter, and he said it is the best game hands down.
Yeah.
And at the time, I don't know if he told us that did he tell us that he was doing this issue?
I don't know.
I don't recall that, but I do remember him mentioning the game because I looked it up afterwards. So cool.
Yep. And then I'd go to 401. And just to mention that it looks like, I don't know if they've done others of these. Oni Press's Square One volumes. I know for example, for The Dam, they did the $10 first collection that reprinted the original miniseries. But here for $10, you can get Stumptown Volume 1 by Greg Rucka and Matthew Southworth, which is a great crime series. And The Bunker Volume 1 by Joshua Hale Fialkov and Joe Infernari, which I believe we talked about the first issue of that. Right,
yeah, when we did way back a digital comics episode.
But I really like this idea. I know, with Image, they often have the first collection of a series at priced at $9.99. But I like the idea of going back and taking kind of classic series or well-established series within a publisher and giving a reduced price first volume to get new readers into that series.
Yeah, I had marked this page as well because I had wondered if Oni had previously solicited other, I guess, similar books under this Square One Edition initiative. I don't remember that, but whether this is the first time that they're doing it or not, I think it's a cool move.
Yeah. Like I said, it maybe The Damned was the kind of impetus for doing more of this stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure, but I hope we get, like, for example, Six Gun.
Yeah.
In this form, maybe a few other things from Oni.
Anything else in Oni?
No. I don't have anything till Uncivilized on page 440.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want to go there. But before that, there are a couple of other things. On page 406, under the Papercutz section, is Volume 2 of Jessica Abel's Trish Trash, Roller Girl of Mars. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned last week that was, the first volume was nominated for an Eisner. So here we have the second volume.
Yeah, and it looks like, from the way the cover looks, that this might be a trilogy.
I guess so. Now, we had, was it me and Andy Wolverton that interviewed her?
Yeah.
It wasn't you, I guess.
Right.
And she was telling us about Trish Trash, and I don't know if she had just finished it or she was in the process of wrapping it up, but I don't remember if she said that this was going to be so many volumes, but it could be 3.
Yeah, the way the covers are designed, there's a 1, 2, 3 next to Trish, and they're highlighted based on the volume number. So
that makes sense.
Yep.
And then in the Titan Comics section on page 426, you and I discussed the first issue of Anno Dracula a while back, and now the trade is about to come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fun series. I don't know if you've been keeping up with it, but
no, I haven't. But I think specifically wanted to wait for the trade.
Yeah, I think that's worth doing, especially along with the prose books as well. But I like this series, so I am picking up the individual issues.
Okay. And then on page 438 under 10 Speed Press is Alexander Hamilton, The Graphic History of an American Founding Father. Mm-hmm. So 10 Speed has, I don't think we've ever discussed any 10 Speed Press books. I'm familiar with some of their output. I know that I think last year at a con, I talked with the creators who did the comic book story of Beer, which is a really interesting book. They've also done the comic book story of video games, and now they're doing this biography of Alexander Hamilton. So, hey, if you're a fan of the musical, then learn about the life through comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Justin Greenwood does the art. I like Justin Greenwood's work.
Yeah, and by the way, the writer on this is Jonathan Hennessy.
Yep.
And then that brings us to Uncivilized on page 440.
Yeah, and so we have The Story of Jezebel by Elijah Brubaker, which says Sunday School meets Comedy Central. It's interesting they refer to up-and-coming comic artist Elijah Brubaker. We've talked more off air, I guess, than on about his series Reich, which is being published by alternative through Alternative Comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's been going on for years. So I like the idea of up and coming being applied to him. I think is interesting, but I do really like Elijah Brubaker's work. Mm-hmm. So this is it says a thoroughly modern and hilarious take on the Old Testament tale of paganism, murder, and sex. So anyway, that looks like fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we do plan on discussing his Reich series in the weeks to come, maybe another month or so after, or as we get closer to the final 12th issue.
Yeah.
So our listeners can look forward to that. So yeah, I'm definitely wanting to get this book. Almost everything that Uncivilized does is worth checking out.
Sure.
And that's all I have in the comics section. I don't know if you have anything. Me
too.
Okay. There are a few titles in the book section.
Yes.
On page 473 is what I was looking at. And yeah, and I think the vast majorities of, I think maybe all of them that I was pointing out are from University Press of Mississippi. And I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I'll just mention the titles and the authors. A collection edited by Jared Gardner and Ian Gordon. The Comics of Charles Schultz. The Good Grief of Modern Life. That looks really interesting. Harriet E. H. Earl's Comics, Trauma, and the New Art of War. There's also John Lent and Zhu Ying's Comics Art in China. And then there's another in their University Press of Mississippi's Conversation with the Comic Artist series, Jim Shooter.
Yep. I'm glad you mentioned those because I think that those are interesting books. I definitely need to check out that Harriet Earl's book, Comics, Trauma, and New Art of War. But I also glad you stopped there too, because I wanted to mention that they're also here soliciting new editions of 3 of the volumes that have come out from Rutgers University Press's Comics Culture series. Bart Beatty's 12 Cent Archie, Andrew Hoberik's Considering Watchmen, and Noah Berlatsky's Wonder Woman, Bondage and Feminism in the Marston Peter comics. And what's notable is that these are not just new printings of these books, but they're also getting color illustrations, which the current versions don't have.
Now, I wonder why they didn't do that initially.
I'm not sure. I'm guessing it was a cost thing. Now, Corey Creekmer is the editor of this line, and I've talked to him about this. And he even said to me at one conference, and I hope this wasn't confidential, but that he was impressed with the number of color illustrations that were in Scott Bukatman's Hellboy book. And so he seemed to have been thinking about color illustrations for books at that point, and these 3 books had already been out by then. So, the color is expensive. So if a press is willing to do it,
yeah. Now I do have one more item in this month's catalog, but it goes deep, deep, deep back where the toys are, and I don't think I've ever mentioned a toy on our preview show, but this is on page 550. And I
didn't even look at toys.
Well, I saw something about this toward the beginning of the previous catalog, and it is vinyl Titan figures of the Beatles. And I've mentioned a number of times on the show, I'm a really big Beatles fan, and this is the 50-year anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So Titan is coming out with their 4 vinyl figures of the 4 Beatles, and there's a 5th figure, I guess you can call it. It's the drum of Sgt. Pepper's, which I don't care about the drum. But the 4 figures, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, yes, I'm definitely interested in those. Now, this is for the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Interestingly enough, the figures that, the vinyl characters here represent seem to be from the Yellow Submarine film.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, give me John, Paul, George, Ringo in any kind of vinyl form, and I'm going to be interested. Not the drum kit, but the figures themselves, the other ones.
But your collection won't be complete without the drum kit.
Yeah, but that's okay. Because I'll probably throw away the box. I'm not one of those who keeps them in pristine condition.
Oh, you're killing me.
What? I'm not one of those guys, I take these things out. I put them in my office. They're conversation pieces. I give them use.
That's good. No, that's what they should be for.
Yeah. So there you go. Andy and I going through the June previews catalog.
Yep.
A lot of stuff.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. So we went through a bunch of titles, and we can guarantee you that you can find the vast majority of those, if not all, at incredible discounts if you head over to the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com, and there you're going to find great prices for the month of June. And after you do get your titles there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe, just like Holly did. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right. Or you can get a hold of us by email. We are 2guys@comicsalternative.com, and you can also write us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And we also have our Twitter feed, which you can check out at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can also find us on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, and YouTube. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
That's right. All the ways to get a hold of us, let us know how we're doing, and find out what we're doing.
That's right. So we're going to be back next week with more Comics Alternative goodness. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.